This presentation is about the role of wizards and other magical figures in Baltic mythology and tradition, specifically that of the Norse, the Finns, the Lithuanians, and the Slavs. Not only will we cover the figures who inspire and make up myth, we will also examine the role of shamans, witches, and sorcerers in Baltic culture and history. The Baltic Sea is bordered by Sweden, Finland, Russia, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Germany. The Norse and Finnish mythology of the pre-Christian era is filled with an array of gods and goddesses and magic-wielding beings, which were rooted in Scandinavian, Finnish, Lithuanian, and Slavic paganism. Although geographically close, these cultures varied in their beliefs and mythology but shared a connection with the sea. Those who were knowledgeable about the physical world, reality, the spirit world, and time were able to use magic to alter any of these things. Human practitioners of magic were tied to our mortal world, but were able to access other places through knowledge of magic. Magic was used for healing, fortune-telling, cursing, hunting, and a variety of other reasons. Another key element was the willingness of the subject to believe in and/or accept the magic. The Norse mythology is one we have all become familiar with as Americans because of the advent of the Marvel Entertainment Universe, which has introduced us to Thor, Odin, Loki, and other figures of Norse mythology. Finnish myth is a little less well known and has a rich oral history. The lore based around the story of Vainamoinen, who was the godlike wizard hero of Finnish paganism. Lithuanian and Slavic mythologies are similar but do not share the same idolization of magic in their culture. Magic is incorporated in their lore but not practiced by the people. Finland sits on the border of eastern Baltic Sea and was home to the Finns who practiced paganism prior to Christian influence, which is what makes it pagan. The polytheistic religion of Finland has an explanation for the creation of the world and Finland and follows the hero Vainamoinen through his life as the godlike wizard hero who guards the Finns from threats both physical and magical. Although there are no physical manifestations of the pagan myth because of it being a rich oral tradition, there is now a comprehensive book of record called the Kalevala. The Kalevala is a compilation of the songs, poems, myth, and lore of the ancient Finns that has been agreed upon in an effort to preserve the culture. The Kalevala notes the origins of Vainamoinen and tells the story through a series of poems and song. Vainamoinen, as previously stated, is the hero god wizard of Finnish myth. He was the original wizard and used his powers to help the Finns and the land of Finland. He fought sorcerers and sorceresses and is partially responsible for creation. He was born after 700 years in the womb and is believed to be extremely wise, with his long white beard and hair as symbols of his wisdom and power. He left Finland when his powers began to wane, and a miracle baby was brought to the land who spoke only to discipline Vainamoinen for his sins after Vainamoinen had sentenced him to death. Vainamoinen did promise, however, to return if Finland ever needed him again. The Finns did believe in sorcery, and there were good and evil sorcerers throughout their history. The good often asked the gods for protection and healing and worked with the spirits of the dead in nature, although all through specific and special ritual. They also defended against demons and sorcerers who used demonic power. One example is a sorceress in the lore named Louis, who is an adversary of Vainamoinen who fought him for something called the Sampo, which is an undefined magical relic of ancient Finland. It is not certain whether the shamanism was present throughout Finland, but some of the Kalevala can be translated as though it was. Vainamoinen was shown to be shamanistic at times, and there are others who acquired knowledge through a trance-like state. The Finns drummed and chanted while the shaman would go into a trance and travel to other dimensions as a spirit. This form of magic was used to communicate with the dead and other spirits from other worlds that paralleled our own in an effort to acquire information. Although we may have expected more fantastical stories about the ancient Finns, I have come to realize it is mostly lore. The replacement of Vainamoinen with a magical baby could very well be the introduction of Christianity to a pagan Finland. When reading the Kalevala, it is clear that the people's hope and willingness to believe in the oral tradition is what made the magic possible. As the religion died out, so did the Finnish practitioners of magic, as the world slowly converted to newer religions. The countries of Denmark, Sweden, and Norway were once conjoined and called Scandinavia. Norse mythology was the religion of the land and one that we've become familiar with through popular culture. This land was the home of the Vikings and the home of Norse mythology, which, when considering magic, focused much on influence and battle. Norse mythology was a pagan religion practiced in the northern part of Europe and the Atlantic. The influence of Norse culture was spread via the Vikings, who ruled the seas for a short period of time, extending trade as much as possible. The king of the gods in the myth, Odin, and he practiced foresight, which is called Sidir, which seems to be the primary magical practice of Norse mythology. The other is Galdur, which were chants and spells that helped the people become more in tune with themselves and the environment. Satyr is the practice of foresight. Shamans called Volver were the ones who practiced Satyr on earth, mirroring the practice of Freyja, who was a goddess in Norse mythology, whom also practiced Satyr, and actually taught Odin how to do it. Satyr was considered unmanly in the Norse culture, and even Odin himself was ridiculed for practicing it. Although the shamans were typically female, there were few men who practiced Satyr. The shamans would typically fall into a trance, and the assistants would pray to her guardian spirit to guide the Volver's soul through the 9 worlds, all the places a soul could access in Norse mythology, Earth being one of these 9 worlds, as they search for information and knowledge. Galdr was the practice of using runes, chants, and objects to better oneself in any situation, much like prayer. Women would use Galdr to make childbirth easier, and some warriors would practice Galdr before battle to have more control over their body. In the lore, Odin had learned to use 18 Galdr, which gave him advantages against fire, sword blades, storms, and a variety of other threats. Galdr and Satyr are the only 2 forms of magic used by the Norse. Looking back at these cultures, it is evident again that hope and willingness to believe is what gave these practices strength. Galdr draws similarities to prayer, which some people use to empower themselves in situations they feel unsure about. Satyr relies on a shaman or Volver to be practiced, which gave these individuals prophet-like abilities. As much as I would like to have found out about people who casted fire out of their palms, it seems that magic is very much driven by the belief of the people. Lithuanian mythology, also called Baltic mythology, was another polytheistic pagan tradition that was practiced in early Lithuania. Their gods were similar traits to those of the Norse mythology in the way that they are physical manifestations of natural forces like thunder or love. Magical heroes are not prevalent, nor is the use of magic by any humans in the culture. Lithuanian magic was set aside for specific entities. Raganas were witches, and they were the only ones with magical powers and often convened to practice magic together. Their magic is mostly considered to bring misfortune, but they were able to use foresight as well. There were also beings called Laumas, who are mentioned in the lore. Their ability let them shapeshift into animals, and legend says they would seduce and tickle men to their death. The Lithuanians did have their own pantheon of gods and creatures who had mystical abilities, but the only magic using humans were Raganas and Laumas. The Slavs passed down oral tradition much like the Finns, however there is no comprehensive account of all their lore. The influence of the Slavic culture is present throughout Russia, Poland, Czech, Belarus, and Ukraine, as well as Bulgaria, Macedonia, Serbia, Bosnia, Slovenia, and Croatia. There is no use of magic in the real world as far as Slavs are concerned. There are, however, characters in the stories that possess magical powers. No persons in the culture would replicate this, though. The Slavs shared stories of witches who used their magic for healing, but were usually evil. There were witches who used their youth to entice men to their deaths, as well as old crones who would abduct children. There were also tales of wizards who held magical powers and separated their souls from their bodies. Elaborate systems were put in place to protect these souls, but if found, the person who held the soul had power over the wizard. They often played the part of the antagonist who abducted the wife of the hero, like Kashi the Immortal. The Slavs and Lithuanians had polytheistic pagan religions that were less reliant on chance than the Norse, and did not praise other magical creatures like the Finns. The magical beings in these Baltic cultures were more characters than anything else, and did not have much of an influence on their respective cultures as the magic use in Norse and Finnish myth. However, they do share the trait that magical beings only exist within the belief of the people who share the lore.